get going. I'll call this meeting to order. Welcome to meeting number 67 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Government Operations and Estimates. Pursuant to the order of reference adopted by the House on Wednesday, February 15th, 2023, and the motion adopted by the committee on Monday, May 1, 2023, the committee is meeting for clause-by-clause consideration of Bill C-290, an act to amend the Public Servants Disclosure Act. Just very quickly, I know we're going to try and keep, I hope, like the last meeting, relatively casual so we can have banter back and forth without spending too much time formally recognizing. I would ask, though, if we are referring to the to our witnesses from Treasury Board, yeah, if you just don't ask direct, please just kind of go through the chair so that we just keep a bit more formal, just for those witnesses. We have with us again Ms. Sauvé and Ms. Boyer from our legislative clerks who are helping today. Before we start, Ms. Sauvé is going to explain something very quickly we need to cover off before we can continue.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just quickly, in reference to the sub-amendment that was adopted to Amendment G3 at the last meeting, I have consulted with the jury linguists, and they were advising that the committee adopt by unanimous consent a very small change in the numbering of the sub-amendment. So if you would recall, in the second part of Amendment G3 that amends subsection 2.1 of the Act, we had a list, A, B, C, D, of what listed measure means. And under D, we had added the contents of Amendment NDP4, which we had renumbered D.1, D.2, D.3, et cetera, et cetera. What the jury linguists are advising is that instead the committee use Roman numerals 1, 2, 3, 4, et cetera, under D instead of D.1. So that's just a numbering change. It doesn't affect the content of the sub-amendment or of this amendment itself. So it's just seeking unanimous consent of the committee to make that small change.
Colleagues, do we have unanimous consent, I assume, so we make the changes? Wonderful. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So returning to the consideration of C-290, we're on Clause 4 with Amendment BQ4, which is page 15 of the package.
Aussi, merci beaucoup.
Thank you. So I have a suggestion, because the amendment is very well done. The goal here is to make sure that there is no type of interference, whether it's used as a reprisal against any public sector employee, including foreign interference. And I also have a suggestion. I don't know if I'm allowed to, but my suggestion would be to add the fact that the term interference works with the regulation so that it corresponds with the other clauses.
An amendment,
No, c'est ça.
but perhaps...
Oh, right. That's correct. I was just asking if
Sauf par
Ms.
consentement
Kusi?
unanime.
through unanimous consent.
Ok, excusez-moi, je vais...
Sorry, I'd just like to say we're speaking of wrongdoings and foreign interference. Ms. Kusi?
Then Mr. Fergus.
Oui, absolument, je peux la faire en place.
Yes, I can do it for Ms. Vignola. No problem.
Do you want to chime in, Mr. Fergus, before we step forward with this?
Yeah, I would. Tout d'abord, j'aimerais remercier
Firstly, I'd like to thank Ms. Vignola and Ms. Kusi for the modifications. Mr. Chair, however, I do still feel that the definition isn't as strong as it should be. Far from it. Because when we think of foreign interference in the public sector, firstly, there is no definition for political interference. Secondly, often we speak of situations in the public service, not against the public service, generally, because political interference is usually foreign interference coming from outside of the public service. So it's not internal, from as far as I'm aware. So I think there is an issue with the definition. What I thought would be useful Sorry, I'm just trying to remember with CPC 3 during the last meeting. Did we pass CPC 3? Yes, it was? Okay. So I think CPC 3 was what we needed here. Sorry. Pardon me. Yes. I apologize. Inaudible? Yes, you're correct. Yes, BQ4 is on foreign interference. The first one is on regulations with political interference, and the second is on foreign interference. I think they're both completely different. I'm certain on that, actually. But like I said,
Interference is directed at the public service, not within the public service. We do have a definition that we're working on with in the criminal code that the government is currently working on in terms of foreign interference and how to define that, which I think would be a better use than adding in something here which doesn't have its own definition. So I would recommend, if other members felt that agreed that this is not this is not an amendment to the clause that we should support.
Ms. Cussy?
Ce que nous avons vu.
yes, given what we've seen with the context surrounding foreign interference, what we've seen at PROC, with what we've seen at the Foreign Affairs Committee, as well as public safety, I think the context is very clear. And I think that this deserves an amendment, its own line in the bill.
Yeah. Ms. Vinola?
Merci.
Thank you. And giving it its own line for the definition, we can add, speaking of foreign interference, as it pertains to the regulation, I think this will allow us to better define foreign interference, just like we've done with other definitions, such as political interference. And in adding this specific line for foreign interference, I don't know if this is the case, but it is possible that there may currently be interference coming from outside the country and that there are people who are ignoring this for whatever reason. So we're trying to avoid this type of situation being allowed to exist in the public service.
I think we might be agreeing on the same things. I'm just going to have Ms. Sauvé confirm what we want to put in.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Donc, juste pour confirmer.
So just to confirm, we're speaking of foreign interference in the public sector, and we just added the same wording that we have in CPC 3. So the term foreign interference as we referred to in the regulation. So I just wanted to make sure that's clear for the sub-amendment. Thank you.
Well, colleagues? Change in BQ4 as not We had a sub-amendment on BQ4. Do we need to read back, or can we just move ahead?
Oui, donc avec... Pardon?
Sorry? In both languages, please. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'll begin with the French. So BQ4 with the sub-amendment. The interpreter does not have the text.
4 soit modifié par adjonction après la ligne 36, page 2 de ce qui suit. C.2, l'ingérence étrangère dans le secteur public, tel que le terme ingérence étrangère s'entend au sens du règlement. Et dans la version anglaise, so in the English version, so that Bill C-290 in Clause 4 be amended by adding after line 36 on page 2 the following. C.2, foreign interference in the public sector, foreign interference having such meaning as may be prescribed.
So on division on the amendment to BQ4? Perfect. On division on BQ4 carry then? On division, shall, as amended, sorry, shall clause 4 carry? As amended, thank you. We are now on to new clause 4.1. Mr. Fergus, I assume you'll speak to that?
Thank you. So what C-290 does is that it will alter the role of the PSIC in a fundamental way. So what we would rather do is to allow the Give Treasury Board, what we're proposing here is amending line 2 on page 3, so that in effect what it will do is that it will give Treasury Board the authority to issue policy on departmental internal disclosure processes instead of giving this power to PSIC. There are a couple of reasons why we would want to make sure that happens, because at the very least there will be this will be a brand new role for the commissioner. It will require additional resources for the commissioner to conduct this role. And frankly, this is what Treasury Board does in terms of establishing standards across government as to how things should work. And it's not something that you would want to have PSIC to describe. As well as the fact that there are going to be some elements when there are going to be some disputes that won't involve PSIC, and that the commissioner will not have line of sight on. So it's better to have Treasury Board establish the standards and then for the commissioner to be able to evaluate things as a result of that standard.
Sorry, Ms. Vignola, then Ms. Cusi.
Personnellement, pour
Personally, for G4, I don't have any issues, but I do have a question, and I think it's the legislative clerk that will be able to answer this. I'm wondering, given that the amendment doesn't specify that these policies will not have a financial impact if the amendment is in order, and if how it's written, it would require royal recommendation, because it doesn't specify that these policies will not have any financial impact. I would like to be clear on this. Does this require royal recommendation?
J'ai pas le temps de faire une...
I don't have the time to do a proper analysis on this question, but at a first glance, this would be under the there would be no problem with this. I don't know if officials have anything to add.
Juste quelques mots. Sorry. Merci pour la question.
Thank you for the question. Just as Mr. Fergus stated, this is one of the responsibilities of the Treasury Board Secretariat. So we do have people who focus on this. That is their job. So I don't think that this would be a problem.
Yeah. Ms. Cusi?
Oui, nous sommes d'accord avec l'idée.
Yes, we agree. we can support G4. Thank you.
Wonderful. Shall G4 carry? On division. Wonderful. Oh, Mr. Fergus.
Yes.
4.1.
4.1. Absolutely. So again, just so that we understand that 4.1 will replace well, this is a new clause, 4.1 rather, and this is we had some. On a eu des belles discussions avec.
We had some great conversations with the Bloc Québécois on this, because we do understand that their initial proposal was to ensure that disclosures will have a larger ability to disclose what they have witnessed. But the Bloc proposal really opened the doors wide to ensure that we are able to share wrongdoing with anyone. That being said, everyone doesn't necessarily have the capability to receive a disclosure. But we can't only have one person who can receive these. So I think it's a good compromise. We need to identify at least one other person other than the individual who is responsible for this in the agency or the department, so that the public servant who wants to disclose a wrongdoing or any type of problem in the public service will have more people that they can go speak to. Yes, I agree.
G41 carry then. On division. Wonderful. CPC 4, which is page 17 of the package. Colleagues, I'm not sure if you've got the page numbers on your agenda, so I'll just call them out as we go. So CPC 4, which is page 17. Ms. Cusi?
Yeah, oui, merci beaucoup.
Yes, thank you very much. So the goal is that the government have the flexibility to determine the definition of support in the regulations and to have this flexibility. I think that support varies depending on the type of situation that we're in. And the government or the department, I think, need this flexibility to determine the support that is offered depending on the situation. Thank you.
Thanks. We have Mr. Housefather, but before we go, if CPC 4 is adopted, BQ5 and G42 cannot be moved due to a line conflict. Mr. Housefather.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I support the recommendation, and I support Ms. Cusi's amendment. I just wanted to propose what I think will be a friendly sub-amendment, which is to add the word non-financial after the words prescribed, so that the whole point of this is to avoid a royal recommendation, which we want to ensure that there is no confusion, that there's some financial involvement here that would require a royal recommendation. So by defining it the way Ms. Cusi had and adding the words non-financial before the word support, I think that would resolve the problem of the royal recommendation. So hopefully that would be considered a friendly amendment. Especially since I believe that the block amendment coming afterwards, which was trying to do that, wouldn't be receivable given the line conflict. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thanks, Mr. Housefather. If you don't mind, I'm going to ask our legislative clerks if they think that is needed, if you don't mind. Ms. Sylvain?
What is needed? Sorry.
Whether we require this amended to avoid it.
Oh. Yes, my apologies. So, thank you, Mr. Chair. My understanding of the decision that was, the ruling that was made by the Speaker in the House of Commons was the issue of the royal recommendation, the heart of the issue for the royal recommendation was C-290 as it was originally written was with the definition of public servant, not necessarily with the notion of support, but if the committee wants to be more precise and make sure, then this would appear to be admissible, yes.
Ms. Cusi?
Oui, je pense que la précision.
Yes, I think it's always a good idea to be very precise. And it's possible that in the future we may have problems if we weren't specific enough.
Perfect. Wonderful. Mr. Housefather, do you want to, I think we just want to reconfirm the wording that you proposed?
Sure. It would be to add the word non-financial after the word prescribed and before the word support. And in French, ce sera d'utiliser les...
And in French, this would be to use the words non-financial.
Ms. Cusi?
Yeah, I've been asked for clarification, perhaps in English, that we act with precision now, just for fear in the future that if we were to move the bill along, that there would be some type of reason, or this reason for which it did not meet the standard for a royal recommendation, so it could not advance. Better to be more precise now, I think, just not to have the risk. Thank you.
Are we ready to, Ms. Spagnola?
La
The friendly amendment from my colleague is interesting, but it's already included in BQ5. So we could decide to put CPC 4 aside to pass the other amendment that already speaks of this non-financial aspect, and that offers a non-exhaustive list of examples of financial support that can be offered, but it's not exhaustive, and that's why we list them as an example, because it can be more than this. So CPC 4, we can put it aside and then take ours, which has already been completed.
Ms. Cusi? We would have to, vote on the sub-amendment before we can get to withdrawing. Just go ahead.
So let's vote on the sub-amendment and then we'll go from there. Sorry.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
My apologies.
No, that's fine.
Okay. So we're voting on the sub-amendment. Mr. Housefather, sub-amendment?
Yes.
On division? And you want to say something now, Mr. Burgess?
So we have some choices between us here. I think now thank you very much, Ms. Cusi, and committee members for supporting the sub-amendment. So now the choice is, I think Madame Vignola wanted us to take a look at BQ5. I'm going to ask you to think of another one, and that would be 4.2, government 4.2, which is very similar. The reason why I would go with Ms. Cusi's just right off the top is because it's very clear, it's non-financial support. The reason why I wouldn't vote for BQ5 is because it talks about to provide non-financial support, excellent, including assistance, advice, and referrals to appropriate resources and information sharing to a public servant who has made, and it goes on. The reason why I'm comfortable with the word referrals is that then it identifies it's not at the request of the public servant. Therefore it would identify the public servant. We want this to be a confidential process. So if there if the idea is to vote down CPC 4, then I would say that the better option would be government 4.2. But if we vote for CPC 4, then we'll withdraw 4.2.
Ms. Cusi?
Excuse me. I just think CPC 4 just provides the greatest flexibility possible. So I feel the other options are too prescriptive, and so we would prefer CPC 4. I do share your concern regarding the referrals. Yeah, I do share that. So I would say my order of preference would be, or ours, excuse me, when I'm speaking, it's the royal I, pardon me, CPC 4, then 4-1, excuse me, 4-1, 4-2, 4-1, was it 4-2? 4-2, excuse me, and then BQ5, I really would not prefer BQ5.
Ms. Vignola?
Écoutez, femme de consensus, de plus.
So to try and get to a consensus, I think 4.2 is a good compromise before CPC 4 and BQ 5. So I think we can go right to 4.2, which is really in the middle between ours and that of the Conservatives. I think that that's a nice consensus that can bring together all these different opinions. It's specific enough while being flexible, in my opinion.
Wonderful. So shall CPC 4 carry as amended? I'm sorry, I go back to you, Ms. Vignola.
OK.
I thought you said we agreed on consensus for CPC 4 as amended.
4.2.
4.2.
We defeat 4
Oh,
and 5.
so we'll withdraw. Okay, I apologize. So 4 is gone. So BQ5, are you withdrawing BQ5 then?
On va see.
We'll withdraw BQ5.
So just as a clarification, CPC 4 is voted down. BQ5
is
is
withdrawn.
withdrawn. And now we're at
Now we're on
G4 2.0. Okay,
G4
thank you.
Can we go straight to a vote on that, colleagues, or are we discussing? So G42 carry? Yep. On division, wonderful. We're now at NDP 5, which is page 19. Mr. Johns, welcome to the game.
We don't have to say much. Hopefully everybody's on board. We can walk through it if you'd like, but I think, you know, what we've, with due process is often routinely denied to whistleblowers, and the commissioner can't prevent reprisals, only address them after the fact. So the commissioner and the tribunal processes often take years, and serious harm can be done to the whistleblower during that time, and they may give up on their efforts to protect the public interest through their disclosure. This amendment would allow whistleblowers to receive due process because they would be protected from damaging reprisals before they cause serious harm, and it's already the job of chief executives to ensure a safe workplace. This is kind of the logical part of that.
Ms. Vignola?
Afin de s'assurer que la
To ensure that if the amendment is adopted, it does not require royal recommendation, I suggest a friendly amendment. So in this amendment, we would add that the support in paragraph A, so the support as laid out in paragraph A allows us to prevent the necessity for royal recommendation. So I'm struggling to explain it with the right words. So that the support laid out be that of paragraph A, non-financial. Is that necessary, or is the current amendment as is? Because what I see is that, as I see the amendment right now, does not require royal recommendation. And to ensure that it doesn't require this, I would reference paragraph A.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Comme je l'ai mentionné tout à l'heure,
Like I said earlier, the speaker doesn't seem to have an issue with this, but if you would like to suggest a sub-amendment, you could then send us some wording that's been written out so that we can make sure that we're all in agreement on the same thing.
Yeah. Mr. Fergus?
So, moi, je suis pas vraiment.
I am not quite comfortable with this modification suggested by Mr. Johns, not because I don't think it's useful, but I think it's a bit redundant. Because in this definition, we speak of establishing procedures, including risk assessments. But what procedures? Defined by whom? Who will establish these procedures? Because there is a procedure that has already been established. So I'm not sure what new procedure we would be establishing here. So I do think it's redundant, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead, Ms. Kusi.
Without amendment, actually, I'm not even sure if there would be an amendment whereby we could support this. We feel that this should be determined by Treasury Board policies internally, and not, I'm using this word a lot, but prescriptive within the bill itself. So as it stands, we will not be supporting NDP 5.
Did you have anything else, Mr. Johns?
This kind of, sorry.
Would you agree?
Do you need a couple moments, Mr. Johns, or colleagues bear with us?
OK. Donc,
Okay, so we're going to try to be clear here. I understand that in being more specific, it might seem that we're making it less flexible. But I like to give any support possible to individuals just to avoid that they go through very difficult situations such as what we've heard of in committee. So at the end, in French, so to provide them in English, we'll add the support established in paragraph A.
on vient refaire une référence pour s'assurer.
So we're making a reference to paragraph A to specify that royal recommendation is not necessary. And we're really trying to make a safety net to protect whistleblowers.
I think we are fundamentally opposed to including risk assessments for those involved in the disclosure and provide support. It's just too. It's just too. It's too much. I think that the Treasury Board should have the flexibility to. Again, sort of evaluate the situation as to the necessary procedures. I mean, I could potentially talk to my team about stopping it after procedures. I'm going to establish procedures for those involved. Again, I think it's very prescriptive. I'm trying to think of another word.
I'm going to interrupt here. I'm not sensing, although, we'd like to do some consensus on this important bill, I'm not sensing the numbers being interested moving forward for this. I'm not sure if there's a path forward. So I'm wondering if we should just go to a vote. And I'm not forcing it, but I'm sensing that.
I think the government and us are in alignment that we're just not comfortable with this amendment. And so I think it would be better if we could avoid the discomfort of a vote.
We'll avoid that.
Yeah.
We have to vote on the sub-amendment first and then get to the amendment. So on the sub-amendment offered? No? No, thank you. And on NDP 5 itself? No. Okay, very no, thanks. Mr. Johns, we're with you again for NDP 6, which is page 20.
I think, is it possible through you, Mr. Chair, to ask the experts to ensure that this would not be a problem in terms of requiring any additional funds? I can't see how it would, but I just want to make sure.
We can, and I was going to bring this up because the legislative clerks have gone through this, and they've all been looked at.
Okay.
And I understand none of them would run into that problem.
Good.
So I'm not sure if we need
basically,
to address each one, but I'll have them just answer your question. Yeah. Ms. LaRoche and Ms. Stevens, you could probably answer for us.
Just
Again, it's that it would require royal recommendation. Is that what you're asking, Mr. Johns?
Sure. Yep. Any funds would.
well, we're not we don't know
NDP6.
what the president would actually. We can't say anything on that. I'm sorry.
To it real quick,
And
so we
then
can fly
Ms.
through this.
Ms. Sylvie could take a stab at it.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So on my apologies, I hadn't heard the question. So yes, on royal recommendation grounds. So again, this already falls under the role of the Treasury Board and would be covered by the initial royal recommendation that accompanied the Act as it's currently written. It wouldn't lead to new spending that would require a royal recommendation.
So I just said I'd bring it here. So, this basically extends the duty of protection for a reasonable time frame, preventing delayed on reprisals. So, we know there's some bad actors that wait until the formal proceedings are over, then they carry out acts of reprisals with impunity, and this amendment would help protect disclosures after the processes are over, and when they're becoming, when they become more vulnerable because the spotlight is no longer on their case. So it's not a hypothetical. There are numerous reported cases that this has actually happened. So this would give the whistleblower confidence that the protections they're receiving will be effective and not just transient and temporary.
Mr. Fergus?
So once again, I'd like to hear my sense would be that this again lacks the consent of the whistleblower, and I think that's just the problem. The whistleblower then gets identified by making sure that support could be provided up to 3 years after the person. Then the department would know who the whistleblower is, would be contacting them, and the point is there's supposed to be a confidential process in place. I'm not certain if I would want new people to be brought in into this, but maybe I could ask the department if they had some views as to how this works in terms of past, the 3 years past the date of which they've been, they denounced an action.
Certainly. Thank you for the question, the issue. The reprisal protection under the PSDPA starts at the reprisal, not at the disclosure. So if you're reprised against 2 years after your disclosure, that's when the protection begins. So this may be redundant.
Ms. Cusi?
My apologies, I keep turning it off and on. For similar grounds as the previous amendment, we will not be supporting this. Thank you. Just to move the process along in fairness to the members. Excuse me? Yeah.
Mr. Johns? Yeah.
So after, like, the tribunal, so a decision's been made, could there be further reprisals where this would be necessary or useful?
I'm sorry, after...
Like if there was further reprisals that took place?
Yes, after any... I'm sorry. Mr. Chair, yes, the answer is after any reprisal, you are protected under the PSDPA.
Okay.
And you're asking about additional reprisals, Mr. Johns?
Yeah. So that, additional, after the formal proceedings are over, that acts are carried out, beyond that timeline. So.
Ms. Stevens or Ms. LaRoche?
Well, if the person, let's say that there were reprisal and then there was a decision as to whether it happened again and then there were further reprisal, then the person could actually go back to the PSIC and be protected.
Okay.
Are you looking for a vote or are you looking to withdraw it?
I'll withdraw it then.
Okay, thanks. Ms. Stevens, Ms. LaRoche, thank you for that. Sorry. Colleagues, we just need unanimous consent for Mr. Johns to withdraw that, I assume. So, Clause 6. Sorry. I apologize. Skipped ahead. Clause 5 carry as amended. Thank you, colleagues. Excuse me 2 seconds. Sorry, colleagues, we're now on Clause 5.1, which is Liberals. All right, Mr. Fergus? That's page 20.1 of the package.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It'll actually be me.
Mr. Jouari.
We are proposing a new clause 5.1, and it will read as, the bill C-290 be amended by adding after line 16 on page 3 the following new clause, colon 5.1, the act is amended by adding the following after section 11, colon 11.1, the Treasury Board may establish policies regarding the duties set out in subsection 11, parenthesis 1, colon. And the reason for that, before I hand it over to my colleague, Mr. Fergus, is that what we are talking about is when we set up evaluation for internal department, we need to also set up standards so they can be evaluated against by TBS. Thank you.
Ms. Cusi?
Further to our consistency with supporting flexibility in regulation, we will be supporting this amendment. Thank you.
Colleagues, shall Lib 5 carry? On division. Excuse me 2 seconds. Okay, we're now on to G 4.3, which is page 20.3 of your package. Seeing as 4.1 passed, we can actually do 4.3. So page 20.3, Mr. Fergus?
La raison pour laquelle on avait présenté cette
The reason we suggested this option was thanks to a discussion that I had with Mr. Garand on the Bloc Québécois. So we're looking at how can we create alternatives instead of just having one individual who's responsible for receiving these disclosures. Now we will have more than one person, and we will establish the processes to do so. So this means that we can establish this in any department or agency. And at the same time, we won't be making it difficult to define. So it's a way to meet the needs identified by Mr. Garand.
If 4.3 passes, NDP 7 goes away, line conflict. Oh. Mr. Johns? If this passes, NDP 7 goes. Colleagues, I won't suspend unless it's going to drag on for more than a couple minutes so that we allow time to chat among yourselves. Ms. Kusi, go ahead.
Oui. Oui, nous sommes d'accord.
Yes, we agree with the idea. I think it's logical. And we will support 6.3. Sorry, pardon me. We're on 4.3, yes.
Colleagues? So G43 carry on division. Thank you, colleagues. NDP 7 gone. Lib 7 has been withdrawn. So shall clause 6 carry as amended? On division, colleagues, thank you. We have a new clause 6.1, which is G4.4, which is 21.2 of the package. Someone should be calling out bingo here. Mr. Fergus.
G 4.4. Sorry, that was my bingo call, sir.
Yes.
All right. This will help us get to a definition of what is a conflict of interest. This is using the Conflict of Interest Act to define political interference by having internal complaints referred to the Ethics Commissioner, who can investigate them. And so this allows that if there are Conflict of Interest Act complaints that are made internally within departments, that those be referred to the Ethics Commissioner. This is 4.4.
Few moments, colleagues, or can we move forward?
Thank you.
It's 21.2. Ms. Vinola?
J'essaie de comprendre.
I'm trying to understand the amendment because as I see it, the whistleblower, in fact, we're removing their choice. They may have a question that is within this current bill, but what that means is that we're forcing the whistleblower to go elsewhere instead of offering them immediate support. I just want to make sure that I've understood the goal of this amendment because it's not quite clear to me because we're removing their choice, the choice of the whistleblower.
Sorry, Mr. Guérin?
Juste à titre de détail supplémentaire.
Just to add an extra detail, the Conflict of Interest Act does not protect people in the case of reprisals. And so in passing this, what we're doing is that we're reducing the scope of the bill, and we'd be removing this protection in the case of reprisal, which is the opposite of the goal of the bill.
Yes.
Certainement pas notre intention.
Of course, that's not our intention. We want to make sure that we have the proper procedures that are applied at the right time, but I'll ask our public servants to explain the scope of this bill.
Please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There is currently a section in the PSDPA so that if the Public Sector Integrity Commissioner receives a disclosure that should be dealt with or is a topic that's covered by the Conflict of Interest Act, he refers those disclosures to the Conflict of Interest and Ethics Commissioner, and they're dealt with under that act. But because the disclosure was originally made to the PSIC, you received the protections of the PSDPA. This amendment would do the same thing for disclosures internal to departments, so that if the subject matter should be dealt with under the Conflict of Interest Act, it would be dealt with by the Conflict of Interest and Ethics Commissioner, but because the disclosure was already made under the PSDPA, they would be protected by the protections of the PSDPA. And it would have the added benefit related to something I said on Monday, that you wouldn't be asking a public servant to investigate potentially a minister or exempt staff. It would be done by the Conflict of Interest and Ethics Commissioner, who already works in that realm.
Mr. Guérin?
Donc, juste pour que...
So just to make sure that I've understood correctly, that means that in this case, if the complaint was done under the Conflict of Interest Commissioner, then they will take this complaint. But if there are reprisals, then the usual procedure in the bill would apply. Okay, I understand. Thank you.
Okay.
Ms. Cusi?
Oui, pour clarification.
Just to clarify, we agree with this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you.
Est-il nécessaire,
Would it be necessary, just to make it more clear, given what you have just shared with us, at the end of paragraph 12.1 brackets 1, so rather subsection, that after the word ethic, comma, ensuring the continuity of the protection of the whistleblower. Would that be necessary to ensure that there are no loopholes here for the whistleblower?
Sorry, turn your mic on.
Monsieur le Président, je suis en train juste de vérifier, mais...
I'm just checking, but it's in the Liberal Amendment number 12, and I'm just trying to find it right now. Sorry about that. Thank you. So in the provisions in Liberal 12, we'll resolve any shortcomings here and respond directly to what Mr. Garon and Ms. Vignola just spoke of. So at 68.
The Commissioner under subsection 12.2 or 24.2.1 of the Public Servants Disclosure Protection Act, the Commissioner shall. and that actually allows us to cover that gap that you've just identified.
Rapidement,
Very quickly, when I was reading the Liberal amendment number 12, this amendment adds a clause to what already exists in the bill, that being clause 12.2, except that in the bill, this clause doesn't exist. Inaudible? So this is related to Government Amendment 4.4. Okay, so we didn't have that yet. So in that case, 12.2 doesn't add any further protection. What it says is that the commissioner needs to send a written explanation of their refusal if they are not following up on this disclosure. That doesn't mean that the whistleblower continues to be protected. Well, that's another clause that will be added. If you take a look at the bill, after line 14, page 12, we are introducing a new subsection. So 42. And in subsection 42, we will respond to this gap. And this will clarify the jurisdiction between the commissioner and no. Well, I can ask our public servants here to give a more detailed answer, but as far as I've understood, that is the case. Can Mr. Chair, can Ms. Stevens respond?
Please and
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Madam Vignola, I think I can reassure you that it's actually in the definition of protected disclosure that it's a disclosure made by any public servant in the course of a procedure established under any other act of Parliament. So whether it's under the PSDPA or it's under the Conflict of Interest Act or it's under the Privacy Act, you are still protected by the reprisal protections of the PSDPA.
incluant l'anonymat.
And is it anonymous for the whistleblower?
Voilà.
The difficulty, it's hard to protect when you don't know who they are.
Donc, on protège ni l'anonymat.
So they're not anonymous, and we're not protecting the whistleblower.
Yeah, please go ahead, Mr. Fergus.
Stevens, anybody who is going to be, any whistleblower would have to declare to someone that they're denouncing or that they are denouncing an activity or an act. They would have to denounce it to the person, and then they are protected, right? And their privacy is protected. Is that not correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And so, can you clarify then your answer to Ms. Vignola in terms of how that protection is extended to those whose complaint would best be addressed by the Conflict of Interest Act?
A disclosure under any act of Parliament is protected by the Public Servants Disclosure Protection Act. But what, if I understood correctly, what the question was about anonymous disclosures. And it is difficult to protect those who make anonymous disclosures because you don't know who they are. You don't know who to protect.
Then I think you might have, I don't think she meant that to be an anonymous disclosure. Or, Madame Vignola, est-ce que vous parlez?
Ms. Vignola, are you speaking of those who are going to anonymously disclose something, or are you talking about the question of whether or not their identity will be protected? The question of their identity being protected. So you misunderstood the question. Sorry. So with this new understanding, could you respond to Ms. Vignola?
Then we're going to go to Mr. Genuis.
Ça aboutit, ça aboutit.
Okay. Merci.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. This amendment references referring matters to the Ethics Commissioner. I do think it's just important to take this opportunity to underline how absurd the situation we have in right now and not having an Ethics Commissioner is. As members know, the government appointed the sister-in-law of a minister as Ethics Commissioner, who then resigned. Now we're in a situation where we don't have an ethics commissioner, which creates all kinds of ongoing problems and challenges. It limits the ability of the office to act. And this amendment just underlines the fact that we need to have an ethics commissioner in place, given the important work the ethics commissioner is supposed to be doing. Thanks.
Okay. Are we ready to move forward with the vote on 4.4? Yes. So 4.4 carry? Yes. On division? Wonderful. Shall clause 7 carry? Yes. On division, colleagues? Yes. Thank you. Clause 8. We have NDP 8. Mr. Johns.
This amendment allows disclosure to the public when the disclosure is not dealt with in a timely and appropriate manner. So, you know, the commissioner is routinely delayed dealing with disclosures in some cases for years while keeping the whistleblower uninformed or misinformed. It's often evident to the whistleblower that investigations have been inadequate when the commissioner has declined to obtain information offered by the whistleblower and failed to interview key witnesses and published a final report without the whistleblower's knowledge containing false statements. So such actions effectively deny due process to all parties, protect alleged wrongdoers, and constitute a type of reprisal against the whistleblower. They also fail to protect the public interest by allowing wrongdoing to continue. So when this happens, a protected disclosure should be able to be made to the public. And when the responsible officials fail to deal with wrongdoing and reprisal in an appropriate, timely manner, whistleblowers could go to the public. So this would motivate responsible officials to execute their duties in a timely and appropriate manner and give all parties timely due process.
Mr. Johns, Mr. Fergus.
So I'm going to be opposing this amendment, not because I don't think it's an important amendment. I think it's because it's unnecessary. Section 19.1 of the Public Service Protection Act, DPA, Disclosure Protection Act, actually does provide coverage for anyone who goes to the commissioner, the integrity commissioner, with any information on wrongdoing, and that former public servants are expressly recognized in that section.
Ms. Spinola, did you have your hand up, or? No. Yeah, then I'll come back to you, Mr. Johns.
En fait, je comprends.
I understand the goal of this amendment, that being to ensure that the commissioner doesn't push the process out forever. But my question is still about protecting the whistleblower. So if it goes to the media, is the whistleblower still protected, even if their voice and their face is covered? Will they be protected? Because the amendment doesn't necessarily specify this, and that's concerning for me.
Ms. Stevens or Ms. LaRoche, do you want to chime in to the question?
This amendment appeared at present. A disclosure may be made to the public under very specific circumstances when there isn't enough time to make a disclosure elsewhere or through the regular procedures, or when there's a substantial and specific imminent danger. In this case, it's basically if you've made a disclosure and the person has, either the PSIC or the senior officer has decided not to investigate, you are free to go public. And they may have made the decision not to investigate on very good grounds. it opens the door very wide for going public with any type of complaint.
And are you able to answer Ms. Vignola's concerns, as just expressed about the whistleblowers gone to the media, what protection that they have?
If a whistleblower goes public under circumstances that are protected by the PSDPA, then they would be protected. It appears that if this amendment passed, they would be protected from reprisal.
Ms. Vignola? And then,
Mais ça demeure que ce serait son
But it would still be their choice, and they would do it knowingly. So if you go public, you're not protected anymore, but it can speed up the situation. So it's their individual decision. We're giving them the right to make this choice with this clause.
OK. Non, c'est beau. Merci.
Okay, thank you.
House Father, then Ms. Kusi.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As I understand it, the Act already protects whistleblowers that would go public in very specific situations, such as if there was imminent harm. This, I believe, vastly extends the ability of a whistleblower to go public for just about any reason if they're unhappy that the senior officer or whoever's investigating decides not to pursue the case or finds that there is no action that's needed to take. And I think that really distorts the system. I can understand sometimes where the system is not working or there's a time issue that you might need to go public. But this assumes that the officer who is charged to investigate is utterly incompetent, because anytime you don't agree with that decision, you're then distorting the system and going public. And to me, there's no point in having a whistleblower system if this wide-ranging article is put in place, giving people the chance to go to the public in the event they're ever dissatisfied with the decision of the person who is charged under the system to render the actual decision. So to me, if I had this in my company, because we obviously had whistleblower policies in my old company, this would entirely distort the process. So I am against it. I think there are times where you allow a whistleblower to go public and be protected, but this is vastly overreaching in this amendment. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. House Father. Ms. Kusi?
We share similar concerns to Mr. Housefather. As well, we're concerned there may be reasons beyond what the public servant knows or sees, perhaps, and therefore we will not be supporting NDP 8. Thank you.
Thanks. Can we move to a vote, colleagues, on NDP 8? On division, colleagues defeated. Wonderful. Shall Clause 8 carry, colleagues? Yes. On division. Shall Clause 9 carry?
Mr. Chair?
On division. Sorry, Mr. Housefather.
Point of order. On Clause 8, you had said that it carried on division before I think anybody had a chance to react. I would like a recorded vote on Clause 8.
No, NDP 8. Are you talking about Clause 8 or NDP 8?
No, NDP 8 was defeated.
Right.
On division. And then
Clause 8.
Clause 8. And
yeah.
I would like to have a recorded vote on Clause 8.
I was doing on division. You want a recorded individual? Sure.
I would like a recorded vote on Clause 8, please, Mr. Chair.
Yeah. Mr. Vergas?
And the reason why we would like to have a vote on Clause 8 is because actually we think Clause 8 should be negated, largely because this whole clause applies only to protected disclosures and former public servants that can't have been reprised against because they are no longer public servants. So there is no case for them to be, there's no stick to on which to beat them with. So that's the reason why we would want to negate Clause 8.
Ms. Vignola?
Nous demandons de conserver l'article.
And we're asking to keep Clause 8 because even if a public servant is not working for the public service anymore, they often face reprisals still ongoing and sometimes threats to their life, to that of their children. And these are, or sometimes they'll threaten to remove their pension, which is illegal, and that's why we'd like to keep Clause 8.
Mr. Guérin?
Vous savez,
You know, the message is really clear. We've heard from Luc Saborin, for example, a witness, and for 4 years he lost his pension as a form of reprisal. And so I think that this clause is important.
no, we got that witness.
Mr. Fergus? And then, Mr. Housefather, is your hand still up? Okay, thank you. Mr. Fergus?
Juste pour répondre à ce que Madame
Just to respond to what Ms. Vignola said, this type of reprisal is already illegal. So former public servants will be protected on this matter because imagine if someone decided, I don't know, to prevent someone from receiving their pension as a reprisal. Well, it's already illegal.
Ms. Vignola?
Certes, c'est
Yes, it is already illegal, but it's still being done. There are former public servants that currently, up until very recently, had to go years without receiving their pension. And so despite the fact that it is illegal to do this, it happens. And that's why we are holding on to this clause, because we want this extra safety for our public servants so that we don't see any more situations like we saw for Mr. Sabourin and the threats that Ms. Dion received as well.
Juste en complément, très rapidement.
Just to add something very briefly, what we're telling you right now is that under the current act, despite the current act, Luc Sabourin, our witness here, did not have access to his pension illegally. And yet we're saying that we're not going to change this.
Ms. Cusi? And Mr. Fergus?
We are in favor of maintaining Clause 8. Thank you.
Fergus?
I'd like to ask our officials a question in regards to this. Post-employment actions, could you please clarify how they're covered? Are they illegal to conduct reprisals against somebody who has left the public service? And how can we, I'm not certain if you're familiar with the case of Mr. Sabourin, but if you are, if you could use that as an example, but if you're not, perhaps you can just leave us with an example of an exemplar of how Clause 8 is not necessary.
Please go ahead.
Thank you for the question. Under the current version of the PSDPA, 19.1, former public servants may make a complaint of reprisal to the PSIC. They're not prevented from making a reprisal complaint. In Clause 8 of the bill, the way it is currently written, has nothing to do with that. It's making it's adding references to former public servants in making a disclosure to the public or the rights to provide information to the public. It has nothing, it doesn't affect their right to make a reprisal complaint in any way.
Mr. Guérin?
Je rajouterai en conclusion que
To conclude, what I'd like to add is that this is an anonymous recommendation.
Sorry, could you clarify?
That what we have in Article 8 was in the recommendations from the 2017 report.
d'OGGO et
of OGGO, and that it was a unanimous recommendation, rather.
Translation error, thank you. Colleagues, we'll do a recorded vote on this. And thank you, Mr. Housefather. Madam Clerk?
So,
Clause 8.
excellent.
Clause 8 carry.
Okay, so on Clause 8, Clause 8 carry. Mr. Fergus. Mr. Baines.
No.
Mr. Housefather.
No.
Mr. Juari.
No.
Ms. Thompson.
No.
Mr. Barrett. Mr. Genius.
Yes.
Ms. Kuzi.
In favor.
Madame Vignola. Oui. Merci. And Mr. Johns.
Yes.
So the votes are 5 nays, 5 yeas.
I will say yes.
Thank you, sir. Casting vote. So that's 6 yeas, 5 nays.
Thank you. I will slow down so that we don't run into this again. Mr. Housefather, thank you again. We're on to Clause 9. Shall Clause 9 carry?
For very much the same reasons, Mr. Chair, I'd like to recommend that we don't carry Clause 9. Adding the term former public servants is unnecessary. We heard that in one of the responses that Ms. Stevens had given. Anyone may provide the Integrity Commissioner with information on wrongdoing, and that former public servants are already expressly covered by Section 19.1, as I pointed out in the previous argument, with the right to complain of reprisal. This imposes a burden on them, Mr. Chair, that just really isn't necessary.
Ms. McNaught?
Étant donné que
Given that the justifications are exactly the same as what we heard for the previous clause, I think we should vote now.
Kusi?
Nous préférons de la garder.
We prefer to keep it. Thank you.
Colleagues? Madam Clerk?
Yes, sir. On Clause 9? Okay, thank you, sir. Shall Clause 9 carry? Mr. Fergus? Mr. Baines?
No.
Mr. Housefather?
No.
Mr. Juari?
No.
Ms. Thompson?
No.
Mr. Barrett?
Yay.
Mr. Genius?
Oui.
Ms. Kuzi?
In favor.
Madame Vignola? Oui. Mr. Johns?
Yes.
So we have 5 nays, 5 yeas.
I'll say yes, thank you.
Casting vote by the chair, 5 nays, 6 yeas.
We're on to Clause 10 now, colleagues. Page 23 of the package. It's G5. Mr. Fergus, you're up again.
I hope this will go quickly, Mr. Chair. This is going to be consistent with what we earlier had agreed to in terms of making sure that the complainant has a reasonable belief that reprisal has taken place against them.
Oh, Ms. Vignola?
en ce qui nous concerne, c'est par
As far as it concerns us, I think it's perfect. We're removing good faith and replacing it by reasonably, which is the national standard.
See.
Oui, nous sommes d'accord.
Yes, we agree.
Colleagues, and shall G5 carry? On the vision. Mr. Johns, you're up again. NDP 9, which is page 24 of the package.
So this removes some subjective requirements and other barriers to the filing of complaints. Currently, whistleblowers may be denied protection by the commissioner on various grounds that are subjective, arbitrary, or inappropriate, and all commissioners have made full use of such provisions to reject or close cases. And analysis of PSIC's case management database for 2007 to 2010 revealed that 40% of disclosures were rejected for, quote, a valid reason and no reason given, and 35% because they were better dealt with by someone else. And in most cases, they were fobbed off the grievance process. So whistleblowers who make disclosures in various forms, timings, and circumstances need to be protected, and the public interest does not care about the semantics of the disclosure process and the exactness of the form of the disclosure. That's why we move this.
Thanks, Mr. Johns. Mr. Fergus?
I appreciate what Mr. Johns is trying to accomplish, but I don't think this is the way to it. This leaves open, the purpose of this clause becomes very unclear. There is a form by which it's important to have a clear process by which complainants would lodge their complaints. If we take away that obligation, then almost any type of form of complaint would be submitted, and then you'll have arbitrary determinations. Why are some, in some forms, are accepted in one department and not in another? I think it could lead to a lot of confusion. I'll exaggerate, but sometimes receiving a form, written on crayon on the back of a napkin is not the right thing to do. But nor is it, you don't want to have another system where then, you have to fill it out in triplicate and have it all attested. There needs to be a pretty standard approach, and this is the reason why I wouldn't want to remove this aspect of, I wouldn't want to support this, so it would remove that obligation.
Mr. Housefather?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Just having been an officer in a company that has been designated to receive whistleblower complaints before, I just want to point out how difficult this would make it for the person who is receiving the complaints. This would allow, for example, you walking up to somebody at a Christmas party and making a complaint to then have that person declare that that discussion was a valid complaint. You really need a standard form in writing to be received to know when you're supposed to start investigating or not. And if you take away in a reasonably acceptable form to the commissioner, the way to handle it is to look at the form, and if we're not happy with the form, to make suggestions about how the form could be made more simple, but it's not to completely remove these words and mean that a verbal discussion with somebody somewhere becomes a complaint. So I would just say from experience, this will not work, and it would make things much more difficult. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Garon?
Je comprends les objections.
I understand the objections of my colleagues, Housefather and Fergus, but as I read the bill as it is right now, the procedure is not clear at all. In an acceptable form for the commissioner, this simply restricts things. There's nothing in the bill that says that the commissioner can accept a verbal disclosure. And there was Mr. Hutton, a witness, who told us two things. Firstly, that we need to look for buzzwords in the complaint for it to be acceptable. And sometimes that was a motive to reject these complaints. And so we're looking for a certain form in which we can submit the complaint. So that the current process is not clear. The commissioner has all the leeway to decide what is acceptable for them, and nothing prevents the commissioner from establishing guidelines and offering tools for these whistleblowers for them to use without excluding other methods.
Ms. Cusi?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I view this as similar to not the same, but similar to the situation whereby there is currently no sitting ethics commissioner. That if the acceptable forms to the commissioner are deemed unacceptable by our witnesses, then really the form should be adjusted. not this amendment inserted, in my opinion. This means that they clearly the acceptable forms to the commissioner are not satisfactory to the whistleblowers, and those should also be evaluated. I think that there's a problem that exists that this amendment does not effectively address systematically and in the right way that it should be. Thank you. So we will not be supporting this. Is the outcome? Thank you.
Mr. Guérin?
Je comprends entièrement. Donc
I understand, so I don't want to waste our time. But in its current form, so in the current form that the commissioner judges acceptable, the commissioner can wake up in the morning and say, well, and choose anything that pleases them as a format, essentially. What I mean is that it's going to remain a problem even after passing the amendment, but the amendment is a step in the right direction instead of the wrong direction. But of course, I do understand your position, although I don't necessarily share it.
Mr. Housefather, and then Ms. Cusi, and then Ms. Spinola.
Just thank you, Mr. Chair. I mean, I just wanted to briefly, and je suis d'accord avec Monsieur Garon.
I agree with Mr. Garon. There's no reason to waste time here.
Is exactly what other commission, the way it's worded here is how it's worded with the Canadian Human Rights Act, for example, in terms of making a complaint. This is the standard wording. And what I would suggest is the OGGO committee has every ability to ask the commissioner's office what form they are using. We can look at the form and we can make suggestions if we find that the form that they're using is incompatible with what we're looking for. But there's no reason to change the act and take away the fact that there's a standard form, which to me is totally reasonable and makes life easier for the commissioner to have one standard form. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
See?
Yes, that's essentially my point. That it seems to me the fault is with the form, or with the forms, or the forms acceptable to the commissioner, whichever it is. I believe it's a problem that is not best solved by this amendment.
Mr. Guérin? Well, Ms. Vignola then, and then Mr. Johns.
Je suggérerais
What I would suggest as a friendly amendment, I was going to say reasonable. You can tell me if it's reasonable. So to change the form so that it be in a reasonable form as is stated in the regulations. So that's my suggestion for an amendment. So we're leaving the possibility of changing things. I thought I would suggest this.
Go to Mr. Johns and Mr. Fergus.
Yeah,
And then
so-
we can read back what we have.
I would support the friendly amendment, because right now it's arbitrary. It's in a form acceptable to the commissioner. It's already arbitrary. It's not. So this amendment, this friendly amendment, I would support.
Mr. Fergus?
Suggest that perhaps in defeating this amendment by Mr. Johns, but Mr. Chair, I turn to you because this is my first clause by clause evaluation that I've done in a long time. But perhaps there would be some way that at the end of the report, we report this back, but maybe we could also report back with a note asking for Treasury Board or the Commissioner to take another serious look at the way that complaints are received, to making sure that it's in a form that is accessible, and there's some way that we could try to get them to take a look at this again.
Mr. Housefather, your hand is up. Your hand is down. Mr. Fergus, you've put me on the spot because this is only the second one we've done in 7.5 years on OGGO. Maybe our ledge clerks can weigh in on that. I suspect I know the answer, though.
Yes, so the report on the bill itself would only contain the text of adopted amendments and any mention of deleted clauses. If the committee wanted to submit additional observations, it would have to be a separate substantive report of the committee. So similar to reports on other types of studies.
Mr. Johns?
It's like acceptable form. It's not a standard right now. Like, I would support Mr. Fergus, and if there's an additional report that we can make recommendations, I would support that so that there is, you know, a more better, more clear.
Draw NDP 9
I would see to withdraw on the agreeance that we support Mr. Fergus's pathway, which is that additional report.
Oh, the 7 amendments, sorry.
In case anybody addresses it.
Colleagues, sorry, we'll come back. We'll deal with the NDP amendment and then the suggested sub-amendment. We have to, Ms. Vignola withdraws her sub-amendment, and Mr. Johns withdraws his. We would need a motion. Mr. Fergus suggested a couple things. We need a motion from the committee to do such thing, whether it is a letter to the Public Service Integrity Commissioner, whether it is for a report to the House, a one line. So that would have to come from yourself. So if you wish, colleagues, if you wish, we can withdraw the two. We can suspend for 2 or 3 minutes. We're running out of time, and you can hammer out something that Mr. Fergus suggested. Okay, well, go ahead, Ms. Vignola.
We're okay with what you suggested. Oh, excusez-moi.
En français.
On est d'accord avec.
We agree with what you suggested concerning the report for the House as well as the suspension to discuss with colleagues.
You're withdrawing your amendment to Mr. Gord?
Yes, we will withdraw it.
So colleagues will suspend at 6:08 or 6:18. We'll suspend at 6:23. And you can work out a motion that we're going to agreed? Okay, we'll suspend for 5 minutes tops. Mr. Johns, you've withdrawn NDP 9? Or do you wish to wait till we have the motion?
Yes. Yes, let's do that.
Okay. I think Mr. Jenis has the motion ready.
One brief moment, please, Chair.
Okay. And we're going to wait a couple seconds again.
I believe it's fine. I just would like one of my advisors to give me the final approval. While we critically evaluate if we've all listened. Thank you.
The motion I'd like to move is the committee report to the House that it believes, in light of testimony it has received, that there should be a standard by which the Integrity Commissioner receives complaints that is simple and accessible, and the committee asks that the Integrity Commissioner provide feedback on this report to the committee by letter.
Oh, can we add a deadline?
Sure. Within 90 days? Is that September?
90 days, sure.
Yeah. Okay.
End of September.
By the end of September, sure.
Sure.
Could we get that shared?
It's just going to.
Oh, good, thank you.
Clerk right now.
Yeah, the problem is it can't be distributed unless it's translated, and we were just wordsmithing on the fly. So.
Ms. Vignola?
Je peux vous assurer que GPT.
I can assure you that GPT and Google Translate are far from being perfect. It's clear to see the difference. So we were going to ask the same thing as Ms. Thompson to receive it in written form, please.
Well, we're not going to be able to get it in written form today, obviously. So.
I mean, I just said it to you.
We need UC to skip over, I understand. I'll double check. Hold on. Colleagues, we'd have to allow or have all of Clause 10 stand, as in we'll have to come back all of Clause 10. We can't just do NDP 9, so G5, even though we've already moved past it, we'll have to come back to Clause 10, which we can do, and get to Clause 11, and then follow up this motion at our next meeting on C290. We're going to go to about 6:45, colleagues. We have resources 6:41, and then we'll make up for the suspended time. So are we agreed that's we'll let Clause 10 stand? On division, wonderful. Sorry, it has to be UC. So I assume we have unanimous consent to allow it to stand?
Yeah. Allow it to stand to mean that we're going to come back to it.
Yes.
That is correct.
Thank you.
We're on to Clause 11, colleagues. Any discussion on Clause 11? Mr. Fergus?
None for Clause 11 on our part.
Oh, thank you for advising us. Colleagues, shall Clause 11 carry? On division. Wonderful. We have Clause 12 with G7, which is page 26 of the package, which is, Mr. Fergus, I assume you're going to discuss.
Yes, I will. This clause prevents overlap with other recourse mechanisms for reprisals, Mr. Chair. What you want to avoid is having multiple processes being conducted on the same issue by different administrative bodies with different mandates, objectives, because that would be not only a waste of resources, but there could be inconsistent determinations with different remedies that would come about. So what this does by simply removing this mechanism or this reference would making sure that we're just getting rid of any frivolous or any intentionally malicious disclosures. And it's consistent with that international standard of we're asking people to bring forward things on a reasonable belief of the verification of that action that should be denounced.
Thanks, Mr. Purgus. Colleagues? Ms. Cusi?
We are in agreement.
Shall G7 carry then, colleagues? Oh, Ms. Vignola?
Est-ce que je dois
Am I understanding correctly that G7 removes possible means of recourse for the public servant? So if I understood correctly, line 24 to 32, this removes A, B, in the bill, it removes subsections 12.1a, 12.1b, as well as 12.2 in the bill. We're at G7. So if we remove recourse possibilities for the public servant cannot use the law if they've already used other laws or collective agreements. We're going against the jurisprudence that was already established, and I don't think that we can go that far.
Je comprends l'esprit.
I understand the spirit in which my colleague has mentioned this, and I don't think it's unreasonable. So to go back to what Ms. Vignola said, there was a case where employment insurance at a certain time, actually Harper government decided that they had temporary workers and seasonal workers, and they said, well, they're expensive, and there was this woman had a grievance with her her agreement, and actually at the time that this public servant essentially had no means of recourse, and Ms. Therrien was lucky because the union actually brought this case to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court established that through a mechanism that is the same as what we have in G7 and is similar to what we have in G6, the Supreme Court decided that they had violated the workers' rights. And I think that we're doing the same thing in G7, and that's the reason for which we are against it. What we have here in the bill does not multiply means of recourse. It actually means that we're avoiding the situation where a public servant has no means of recourse because the case has already been heard. So I would ask my colleagues to reconsider their position here, and I think that it goes against the spirit of the bill. There's no risk of multiplying the means of recourse.
Did you want to respond, Mr. Fergus?
I do, because I think that actually, more to the point, I think Amendment G7.1 on page 26.1 will actually, do I have that right? I'm just trying to think of which one that does apply. That we actually are going to be leaving open. You know what? I'm going to ask I believe what will happen is that we're actually going to be making sure that we remove overlap so that we don't have those differing results and differing procedures. But I'm going to ask our officials if they can shed some light on the Terrien case and how this can help clarify a role so that we don't have any overlap and duplication.
Merci beaucoup pour la question.
Thank you very much for the question, Mr. Chair. When we look at the current law, there are 4 articles. So first we have collective agreements. And if we look at C90, this clause is no longer there, and it's the same case for if the complaint is not done in good faith. And so Amendment G7 does 2 things. Firstly, it reestablishes the clauses and replaces the word good faith by reasonable belief.
Ariane?
Ms. Vignola?
Donc, je vais réexpliquer pourquoi les...
So I'm going to re-explain why these 2 clauses in the current law were withdrawn from the bill. The bill repealed these 2 clauses because at the Supreme Court, in the case Terrien versus Her Majesty, the Supreme Court made the decision that even through the law, we cannot prevent a worker to not have access to their rights. And G7, G6 reestablish these original clauses of the law, and they go against this Terrien versus Her Majesty decision, and therefore is contrary to jurisprudence. And I would repeat that these 2 clauses mean that these workers will not have access to their rights, and so we cannot allow that. And this is the reason for which we have repealed them, and it's the reason why we cannot accept G6 and G7.
Mr. Fergus?
Pour s'assurer que
To ensure that there's no gap here between the 2, I'd like to suggest to my colleagues that we look at 2 other amendments that we would like to suggest. Firstly, G7-1, as well as Lib 9, page 32.1. And in this section, firstly, we're going to create a procedure, but also, if we get to a point where the commissioner decides to not undertake a case and refuses this case because he does not think it is well founded, we would require the commissioner to offer another option or information on the appropriate mechanisms to follow up on this disclosure.
Before you start, though, I understand the motion has been distributed. We only have about 3 or 4 minutes. I don't think we're going to settle Clause 12 today. Are we comfortable leaving this and we'll get to the motion? And I just want to confirm with Mr. Genuis, you meant 2023 for the date? September 30th?
I don't think that necessarily needs to be the text as long as that's well understood. But
okay. Colleagues, are we comfortable just going back to the motion and getting that? Okay. Mr. Johns, was there something, or? Okay. Okay. Are there any objections to the motion? Can we all agree to it? Mr. Johns, I just want to double check with you.
Yeah. No, hold on.
Ms. McNulty?
It's okay to me.
So we're fine with the motion as distributed? Wonderful. So the motion is passed. We had, we'll forget clause 12. Actually, we've already started. We've only got 1 minute, so I'm going to suggest we adjourn. Before we do, colleagues, our next meetings are quickly running out of time. Our next meetings after available to us is June 12th, which I'd set aside for the line by line for the GG. I'm hoping we can do 1 hour with the GG line by line to get that report done. And then we'll continue this in the second hour and hopefully finish this by the 14th. If we no objections to that, so we'll consider that our plan going forward. Mr. Fergus?
I always tell my family, seize victory, but I'm still going to ask this question. I don't know if the analyst or the clerk could give us an indication how much time after the 14th before you would be in a position to report this back to the House so that we respect I think the unanimous consent that we would want this C-29 to be reported back to the House before the summer break.
The cutoff is the 21st, assuming the government does not prorogue, which is...
Leaders don't negotiate something else.
But the cutoff for reporting back is the 21st. We have the 14th and 19th open to us right now. Mr. Johns, Ms. McDonough, then Mr. Jouari.
Mr. Chair, can you just give us a quick rundown, 29th, 31st, 5th, 7th, so we can make have a quick discussion on this?
Yep, it's 29th. We are welcoming back the Minister for PSPC for the main estimates. And then the second hour is the bureaucrats. The 31st is TBS Minister. President of the Treasury Board will be here for 1 hour. Then the bureaucrats. The 5th and 7th will be 2 hours each with the departments that we've been putting off for them to come discuss with us their refusal to obey the order of the committee to hand over the unredacted documents. 12th is tentative the GG report. Colleagues, maybe we can leave it with the 29th and 31st, 1 hour with the minister. Minister Fortin has said she will do an hour 20, my understanding, on the 31st, and the rest of the time we can get back to this, or we can continue with the department, the DMs for the estimates, which is tradition. But it was Ms. McNulty, then Mr. Jouari, then we'll go back to you, Mr. Johns.
If we could do...
McNulty?
Donc, première question.
So, first question. I know that the ministers are very busy, but is the 5th and 7th possible to bring in the ministers? That's my first question.
I can assume no, but it's also way past the tabling of or reporting back to the House.
Deuxième point.
Second point. It's committee business, but it's the last committee of my favorite colleague Mathieu because he is moving on to go work somewhere else. So Mathieu will have a new job starting next Monday. So I just wanted to publicly thank him for his wonderful work.
Are we celebrating his new job or shaming him for leaving us? I'm not quite sure. Thank you. We'll miss you, sir. Mr. Jouari, then we'll go to Mr. Johns.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Chair, is it possible for the committee members to consider continuing the clause by clause on the 5th and 7th and having the departments come 14, et cetera, because 5th and 7th gives us the opportunity to be able to continue, finish this, and mitigate all the risk, and then we have the departments coming in. And by no means this is in any way of trying to push the department out. We're one way or another supportive of either continuing and on 5th and 7th or bringing the department on the 5th and 7th. It just I'm worried that we're not going to be able to get through this. And the other option is do 5th, 7th the department, then do another clause by clause. So at least we get the clause by clause going.
The problem is we've booked and canceled them twice already. I'm going to suggest maybe we're all here tomorrow. I will find time we'll do a subcommittee to look at the calendar. I'll ask everyone to think about for the estimates process to do the minister only and then clause by clause for the second hour. But I'll find time tomorrow or Friday. We'll do a subcommittee to hammer out the schedule, acknowledging the importance of this bill, but also I think the rather incredibly important issue of departments refusing an order of the House. Oh, that's right, Friday. I will find time to chat with the subcommittee members tomorrow. But I'll ask you to go away with some thoughts, and we'll work on some options and present. Mr. Johns, was there something else? We do have to adjourn because of resources. Mr. Johns, was there anything else?
No, I actually like what he said there because I want to get this bill through.
Yeah.
But that's the only thing that I agree with.
Okay, we will.
Everybody on.
We will we'll subcommittee tomorrow, and if there's nothing else, we will adjourn right now. Colleagues, thank you.
Mm-hmm.